Birchwood Meadows was a picturesque suburban community best described as orderly. Rows of near-identical houses lined smoothly paved roads with gentle curves, each front yard adorned by carefully selected shrubs. A grand sign at the entrance proclaimed the community's name in elegant script. Visitors admired the manicured flower beds and polished driveways, praising the area's harmonious aesthetic. Behind this serene facade, however, lay the watchful eye of the Birchwood Meadows Homeowners Association, HOA, an entity famed for upholding a strict set of rules. Most residents abided contentedly. They liked the sense of security that came with a well-maintained, methodical environment. Fines existed for petty infractions, leaving trash cans out too long, painting a door in a non-approved hue, but the community generally accepted these constraints as the cost of living in a controlled haven. Some found them burdensome, but complaining rarely helped. The HOA's enforcers were relentless. A central figure in the HOA was Brenda Arnett, a middle-aged woman who, despite her real name, was privately nicknamed Karen by exasperated neighbors. She wasn't the HOA president. Her official role was smaller, but her forceful personality led her to champion the strictest interpretations of the bylaws, frequently patrolling for trivial violations. She thrived on the authority, priding herself on protecting property values by calling out any perceived flaw or nuisance. Among the neighbors, some appreciated her vigilance, particularly those who shared her rigid beliefs. Yet many grew wary, noticing how Karen singled out easy targets or hammered petty transgressions. It seemed no one was safe from her stern notes and condescending scoldings. None suspected, however, just how far Karen might go when confronted by something that personally inconvenienced her. Her next target would be an elderly man who used a small mobility cart to roam the quiet, sunlit streets, unaware that Karen saw him as a slow-moving obstruction to her perfect suburb. And soon, an impulsive, violent act on Karen's part would spark a wave of neighborly solidarity that would forever redefine accessibility in Birchwood Meadows. George Grandpa Whitaker had resided in Birchwood Meadows for nearly a decade, moving in after retiring from a long career in construction. At 78, he coped with arthritic knees and mild heart issues, yet remained spirited. He adored the morning sunrises, frequently puttering around in his motorized mobility cart, an upright seat with an electric motor. This little cart, affectionately nicknamed Blue Bell, gave him independence to visit friends, pick up groceries, and enjoy a daily ride to the local pond. George's family visited often, especially his daughter Martha and grandson Trevor. They admired how the cart kept him active. He refused to be housebound, insisting on exploring every day. Neighbors found George charming. He'd wave at passers-by, occasionally offering a friendly chat about community events. Despite his limited mobility, he radiated warmth. In her walks, Karen regularly encountered George inching along the sidewalks. While most slowed to greet him or let him pass, Karen found his presence irksome. His cart's top speed barely outpaced a brisk walk, and if she got stuck behind him, she'd grow impatient. She complained that his slow pace impeded foot traffic in narrower walkway stretches. Instead of politely waiting or giving him extra space, she considered him a nuisance, a symptom, in her mind, of complacent rule enforcement. George sensed her glares but brushed it off. He tried to accommodate, pulling over if others approached. Still, Karen's scowl deepened each time she saw him. Some said she even tried to hurry him by snapping her fingers or clearing her throat loudly behind him, urging him to move aside. George, a gentle man, never confronted her, believing civility would prevail. Unbeknownst to George, Karen's frustration simmered. She disliked any inconvenience, especially from what she deemed slow, burdensome usage of the sidewalks. The notion that older residents might clog up the neighborhood pathways struck her as an offense to Birchwood Meadows' clean, efficient look. Her petty annoyance would soon escalate into a shocking act, forever changing the community's calm facade and testing the moral backbone of the entire HOA. A mild friction built over weeks. Karen posted on the community message board complaining about congested sidewalks, due to over-large mobility scooters, though she never named George. She argued that people with mobility devices should stick to certain hours or designated paths. Residents responded tepidly. Some recognized Karen's typical pattern, a small inconvenience fueling her outsized sense of authority. Others pointed out George had every right to use public sidewalks. When nobody took her side, Karen ramped up the rhetoric at the HOA meeting. She pushed for a policy restricting oversized personal vehicles from main sidewalks, citing a bylaw about obstructions. The board, more practical, saw it as an attempt to hamper the disabled. They tabled her motion for further discussion, effectively ignoring it. Karen left fuming. George remained oblivious to the intricacies, continuing his gentle rides. He'd greet neighbors, sometimes delivering small hand-sewn craft from his daughter to friends. He believed life was too short to worry about minor conflicts. Meanwhile, Karen's exasperation with him peaked. She felt personally disrespected each time she had to slow her brisk walk. She'd glare or mutter under her breath. Yet George's courtesy only enraged her more, as though her negative energy was deflected by his calm. A week before the meltdown, neighbors saw Karen stalking near the clubhouse path while George approached on his cart. He politely offered to move aside. Karen marched past with a huff, practically stepping on the cart's front wheel. A neighbor overheard her muttering, "This can't go on. We'll see who has the last say." The neighbor brushed it off as Karen's usual dramatic talk. But the tension was undeniable. Soon, it would explode into a single act that left the entire community outraged and the culprit's reputation in ruins. It happened on a sunny Friday afternoon. George was riding his cart back from the small neighborhood pond, delighting in the mild weather. He turned onto a quiet sidewalk near the center of Birchwood Meadows, moving at a modest pace. Approaching from behind, Karen found herself stuck walking behind him again. She fumed. Her patience snapped. She quickened her steps, calling out, "Move it, old man." George, startled, tried to shift to the side, but the sidewalk was narrow, flanked by a hedge. Karen refused to slow. She closed the distance, then, in a burst of anger, placed her hands on the back of George's seat and shoved. The cart lurched forward, tilting precariously. George, unprepared, lost his grip and toppled off sideways onto the lawn. He landed with a gasp, the cart tipping onto its side, wheels spinning aimlessly. Karen froze, momentarily shocked at her own violence, then sneered, "If you can't keep up, stay off the path," before storming away. Two passers-by rushed over, helping George up. He grimaced, suspecting bruises along his arms and hip. The onlookers were appalled at Karen's aggression. One immediately phoned 911, unsure if George needed medical assistance. Another snapped a photo of Karen striding off, though not a full-face shot. George, trembling with shock and slight pain, managed to stand with assistance. He was more shaken emotionally than seriously injured, though a doctor's check might be wise. Paramedics arrived, giving George a brief once-over. He had no broken bones, just bruises. The police also took statements, noting that an assault was alleged. The passers-by recounted Karen's push, though no one had direct video. But they recognized her from her countless HOA zealot activities. As neighbors learned of the incident, outrage swelled. Shoving an elderly man from his mobility cart? It was unthinkably cruel. Karen, upon realizing the magnitude of her action, tried to lie low. But soon, the entire community would confront her brazen deed. Meanwhile, George's family, especially his daughter Martha, seethed at the assault on their beloved patriarch. The stage was set for a communal reckoning. Karen's thirst for control had crossed into physical violence, demanding a swift, resolute response. The news of Karen's assault spread through Birchwood Meadows like wildfire. Neighbors visited George's home, expressing shock and empathy. Martha, outraged, insisted on pressing charges if the police concluded Karen was responsible. George felt torn. He disliked conflict, but recognized this was no minor scuffle. He agreed to cooperate with any legal steps. Meanwhile, on the community's message board, condemnation poured in. "Unacceptable. This crosses all lines. Karen must face consequences. She literally shoved an elderly neighbor." I'm speechless. Karen avoided public gatherings, apparently aware of the backlash. A few quiet loyalists tried to downplay the incident, suggesting George blocked the path. But most saw it as an indefensible act of aggression. The HOA board convened an emergency discussion, unsure how to proceed. They recognized it was a criminal matter if proven. Ms. Daniels, the HOA president, stated publicly, "We deplore violence. We'll address Karen's status once police complete their investigation." Meanwhile, the family comforted George, ensuring he rested. He had bruised ribs, making it painful to move. The cart's handle was bent, needing repairs. The normally cheerful man felt shaken. How could a neighbor do this simply over sidewalk inconvenience? Martha posted on social media, narrating the assault. Sympathy and outrage soared. A friend set up a small GoFundMe to replace George's cart if needed. In mere hours, it surpassed $1,000. Behind the scenes, the neighbors also mulled a more permanent statement, something that ensured no one in a mobility device would be threatened again. A small circle of supportive families considered surprising George and any other seniors needing help with a stock of new, upgraded mobility carts. The concept was radical, providing free or low-cost rides, ensuring no fear of sabotage or aggression from people like Karen. The seeds of that idea took root, waiting for the right moment to bloom. Under rising pressure, Karen attempted to spin the narrative. She told the police she merely tapped the cart to get him to move and that George toppled over by accident. She claimed the sidewalk was obstructed and she had no choice but to push. The officers, unimpressed, took note of contradictory witness statements describing a clear, purposeful shove. Charges might be forthcoming if the district attorney found enough evidence. Karen also emailed the HOA board, disclaiming responsibility. She said George lost balance on his own, painting herself as a victim of defamation. But the board had already heard from multiple bystanders who saw her forcibly push him. Ms. Daniels recognized that if even half those accounts were accurate, Karen had physically assaulted an elderly man. Ms. Daniels warned Karen the HOA could censure or remove her from any official position. Despite her protestations, Karen found few supporters. The ramp fiasco overshadowed everything. This was no argument about bylaw enforcement or eyesores. She had committed actual violence. Some neighbors wondered if mental stress had driven her to snap. But that hardly justified the assault. George, ironically, stayed quiet, letting the police handle the official investigation. He didn't want to fan flames. Meanwhile, Martha was vocal about demanding accountability. She publicly called for Karen to apologize, though she doubted one was forthcoming. Tension soared in the neighborhood. Many expected the board to hold an emergency meeting about the incident. Ms. Daniels planned to do so soon. Meanwhile, Karen realized her usual tactics, threatening bylaw citations, were worthless here. She faced moral condemnation from nearly everyone, plus potential legal charges. Her once formidable influence seemed to be crumbling. The entire community felt uneasy. Residents once enthralled by neat lawns and uniform shutters realized a deeper question loomed. Did they want an HOA whose member assaulted a senior over sidewalk space? The possibility of Karen continuing to police the area felt outrageous. Some demanded her immediate removal from any HOA committee. Others asked for the board to place her on indefinite suspension. A few hoped she'd simply move away. Meanwhile, George's bruises started healing, though his chest still ached. The emotional shock lingered. He dreaded encountering Karen on the sidewalk again. Martha worried that he'd lose confidence or stop venturing out. She insisted he not let fear keep him housebound. George tried to remain upbeat, but the memory of Karen's push unsettled him. In solidarity, neighbors brought baked goods, well wishes, and helped fix the bent handle on George's cart. The outpouring reminded him that Karen was a lone voice, not reflective of the entire community. Encouraged, he ventured out again after a few days, albeit carefully. People who saw him apologized for the ugliness, though none of it was their fault. The sense of communal shame for Karen's act hovered. Meanwhile, the idea of donating extra mobility carts gained momentum. A local philanthropic group that supported elderly independents offered partial sponsorship. If the neighbors matched funds, they could buy a small fleet, maybe 5 or 6 second-hand but well-maintained carts. Then, any senior or disabled resident lacking resources could borrow one. The symbolic statement was clear. They'd promote freedom of movement instead of cowering to intimidation. Ms. Daniels found the concept promising, though she didn't want it overshadowing official board actions to address Karen's behavior. She recognized that unveiling a free mobility cart program right after a board censure would emphasize how the community valued compassion over aggression. The key was ensuring the plan was well-structured. Someone had to store and maintain the carts. Regardless, talk of such generosity spread, fueling hope that Karen's violence would yield a robust, positive legacy. More accessibility for everyone. The entire fiasco hovered on the brink of resolution, with an emergency HOA meeting just days away. That meeting would decide Karen's future on the board and possibly shape the final form of the mobility car donation plan. The clubhouse filled to capacity for the emergency HOA meeting convened by Ms. Daniels. The single agenda item, addressing the assault on resident George Whitaker. Board members took their seats at a long table before a tense audience. Karen arrived last, looking uncharacteristically subdued, though her face still wore a defiant edge. Ms. Daniels opened with a statement. The board condemns any act of violence in Birchwood Meadows. We called this session to determine how to respond to Ms. Arnett's alleged assault. She invited George to speak. He recounted the incident calmly, describing how Karen shoved him forcibly off his cart. Witnesses confirmed that account. George ended by saying he wanted only safety for himself and all mobility-impaired neighbors. He wasn't craving revenge, just accountability. Karen then got her turn, claiming once more that it was an accident. She said, "He was blocking the path, and I tried to help him move aside. He must have overbalance." Boos and shouts of "liar" erupted from the crowd. Ms. Daniels banged the gavel, restoring order. Another board member read statement from eyewitnesses, each describing a deliberate push, not an accidental nudge. Public comment followed. Person after person demanded Karen's immediate removal from the board. Some raised the possibility of pressing criminal charges. Ms. Daniels explained the police investigation was separate. The HOA could at least censure or remove her from any official capacity. Karen fidgeted, glaring at those speaking against her. After an hour, Ms. Daniels called for a board vote on removing Karen from her committee roles and censuring her. Out of 5 board members, including Karen, voted yes to remove and censure. With Karen alone no, the motion passed. Applause and cheers thundered. Karen was stripped of her HOA authority, effectively demoted to a regular resident with no special privileges. In the hush that followed, Ms. Daniels hammered the gavel, concluding that Karen's act was unconscionable and any further aggression would lead to additional measures. Ms. Daniels didn't mention potential membership eviction, but the message was clear. Karen was on extremely thin ice. The meeting closed with neighbors relieved. For the first time, official condemnation of Karen's tyranny felt real. Shortly after the meeting, the philanthropic notion blossomed. Linda Perez, a longtime friend of George's daughter, spearheaded the Birchwood Mobility Project. They aimed to purchase multiple used or refurbished electric carts. People chipped in via an online fundraiser. Within a week, over $5,000 was raised, enough to buy at least 5 good-condition carts plus cover basic maintenance. Carl, another disabled neighbor, offered to store 2 carts in his garage until they arranged a better location. The rest could be stored in the clubhouse's underused storage room, if Ms. Daniels approved. She did so eagerly, seeing it as an official community improvement. Each cart would be available to any resident who needed short-term or occasional mobility aid. Meanwhile, George's story inspired many outside donors, moved by the notion that a violent push had led to a surge of empathy. Karen's defeat added impetus. If she intended to limit mobility device usage, the neighbors would multiply them. In a short time, the once lonely grandpa's cart was becoming part of a small fleet. The symbolism was powerful. Karen's aggression spawned a direct expansion of the very phenomenon she tried to stamp out. Ms. Daniels loved the poetic justice. At a small gathering, the newly acquired carts were unveiled, painted in bright colors, blue, red, green, some with crocheted seat covers courtesy of the crafters. George, still with a slight limp from bruises, teared up as he saw multiple folks riding around safely, free from fear. The next step was finalizing a simple sign-out system for those wanting to borrow a cart. Volunteers lined up to help maintain them or schedule checkouts. Even local seniors beyond Birchwood Meadows heard about it, praising the community's generosity. Karen watched from afar, overshadowed. Her attempts to hamper disabled neighbors ended in a spree of new mobility devices. The entire fiasco encapsulated how cruelty can boomerang. Freed from her obstruction, George's daily rides continued, now with a growing chorus of electric whirs around the block, each cart a testament to unity over hate. Meanwhile, the police investigation concluded. Though witness testimonies strongly indicated a deliberate push, the local district attorney decided to pursue only a misdemeanor assault charge. In practice, Karen might face fines or a short probation if convicted. Some neighbors felt it was too lenient for harming an elderly man. But George, focusing on emotional closure, didn't push for the maximum penalty. He hoped the basic charges might force Karen to accept accountability. Karen's lawyer negotiated a plea deal, apparently. She ended up with a small fine and community service hours, ironically assigned to tasks in senior centers or something akin to that. The neighbors found it fitting that she'd have to spend time assisting older adults. The final sentencing was mild. No jail time, no major restitution. But the moral condemnation stung. She'd carry the label of someone who shoved a senior. That alone tarnished her standing far more than any official punishment. George, for his part, settled into a routine. The bruises healed, though psychologically he felt a twinge whenever passing that fateful sidewalk. The outpouring of support from family, friends, and the entire community overshadowed the negative memory. Meanwhile, the new mobility carts became a daily sight. Some seniors used them for shopping runs, others for relaxing tours of the neighborhood. People joked that if Karen disliked one cart's slow pace, how would she react to 5 or 6? The official justice concluded, the board's censure in place, and the community service assigned. It seemed the fiasco had run its course. The next chapters in Birchwood Meadows' life would revolve around everyday concerns, free from Karen's overshadowing mania, if she didn't stir up another confrontation. In the aftermath, the entire neighborhood realized how fragile civility can be, but also how swiftly they could unite to defend the vulnerable. Post-censure, Karen's presence in Birchwood Meadows was drastically altered. She lost her seat on the compliance committee, no longer scouring for petty violations. Ms. Daniels replaced her with a kinder, more balanced neighbor. Freed from Karen's meddling, the community found a lighter atmosphere. Complaints about minor yard decor or mailbox angles diminished, replaced by positive discussions about gardens, events, and family barbecues. Karen retreated to a solitary role, seldom attending HOA meetings or social gatherings. When neighbors spotted her, she wore a bitter expression. Some suspected she blamed the entire community for her downfall, ignoring how she instigated it by physically attacking George. Others guessed she might list her house soon, though no sign appeared. A hush around her replaced the old fear, as if the community collectively decided to starve her of attention. Meanwhile, the new mobility carts thrived. The donation program gained a name, Wheels of Kindness. A basic sign-out sheet let neighbors borrow a cart for up to a day at a time, like if they had an injury or visiting grandparents. People marveled at the convenience. The crafters crocheted seat cushions for each cart, personalizing them. A local battery shop offered discounted maintenance, touched by the story. George resumed daily rides, sometimes accompanied by other seniors who borrowed a cart for the joy of a group outing. On warm evenings, a small procession of electric whirs could be heard as the group cruised side by side, chatting. The new normal was one where mobility devices were not just tolerated but embraced. Karen's attempt to push away one slow cart, ironically created a mini mobility revolution. This shift in dynamics spilled into other aspects of community life. Freed from oppressive oversight, neighbors felt safer expressing themselves. Some started small front yard gardens. Others placed tasteful decorations once suppressed by Karen's scorn. Ms. Daniels recognized the spirit of collaboration soared, overshadowing old anxieties about fines or petty rules. The fiasco had inadvertently liberated Birchwood Meadows from Karen's stifling influence. As spring blossomed, the Wheels of Kindness program decided to host a short parade to showcase the donated carts. George led the event, decked out in a bright vest, driving his newly repaired cart. Following him were other seniors, temporary users, and even a few kids riding along for fun. Laughter and applause greeted them as they looped around the block. Some neighbors said it resembled a mini Mardi Gras, with crocheted streamers and balloons on the carts. Ms. Daniels gave a short speech afterward, praising the neighborhood's willingness to stand against aggression and champion inclusivity. She thanked the philanthropic donors and the local battery shop for their help. The crowd cheered, especially whenever George's name was mentioned. He humbly waved, hugging his grandson Trevor. Martha, proud to see her father's independence so thoroughly reclaimed, wiped away tears. Karen was absent from the parade, presumably avoiding more public embarrassment. Some half expected her to appear and scowl at the cart carnival, but no sign of her. Others mused she'd given up interfering in a realm where the entire community had unanimously decided her stance was unacceptable. Carl, who also used a wheelchair, quietly told George how comforting it was to see multiple mobility carts around. He never fully recovered from earlier fear that he might be targeted next. Now, seeing the board's strong stance and the wave of generosity, he felt safe. That, he said, was the real triumph. Not just punishing Karen's deed, but forging a permanent environment of acceptance. As the parade concluded, a small potluck formed on the clubhouse lawn. People shared homemade snacks, crocheted seat covers, and lively conversation. The overshadowing tension from months past felt distant, replaced by a renewed sense of neighborly connection. Thus, the legacy of Karen's push extended beyond any single ramp or cart, embedding empathy deeply into Birchwood Meadows culture. Over the next few weeks, rumors swirled that Karen had quietly contacted a realtor. A neighbor glimpsed an agent's car in her driveway. Another said they saw Karen packing boxes. Yet official listings for her property had yet to appear. Some speculated she was testing the market, deciding if the potential profit justified leaving. Others thought she might remain out of stubborn pride. Opinions were divided. Some neighbors, especially older ones like George, felt no joy in her possible departure. George believed everyone deserved a chance at redemption. Others, especially those traumatized by her earlier meddling, privately cheered the idea, believing her leaving would finalize the community's healing. Ms. Daniels, always diplomatic, saw no reason to weigh in publicly. Meanwhile, the Wheels of Kindness program thrived. The crafters crocheted little blankets for the carts. The battery shop gave routine checkups. Word spread to neighboring HOAs, some inquiring how to replicate such an initiative. The sense of pride in Birchwood Meadows soared. People said they reclaimed their community from petty tyranny. Karen's house remained in a state of half-curtain and half-blind closures. She seldom emerged except for errands, rarely speaking to passers-by. She'd become a figure of pity or scorn, a self-inflicted exile. Meanwhile, the police's misdemeanor assault case trudged along. She'd do her community service soon, presumably in a local senior center, ironically. The synergy of it all weighed heavily on her once-inflated sense of power. As spring gave way to early summer, the cart usage blossomed further, some families even letting out-of-town relatives borrow them. Freed from the overshadowing presence of a meddling figure, the community's daily life felt more spontaneous and open. The leftover question lingered. Would Karen try a final disruptive act or slip away quietly, overshadowed by the unstoppable wave of kindness? Karen's community service assignment began at a local senior care facility. Observers mused that fate had dealt her a twisted form of justice, helping the very demographic she attacked. She arrived in the morning, assigned to wheel patients to the dining hall or organize activity supplies. Staff members, aware of her backstory, watched warily. Some seniors recognized her from news in the neighborhood. She endured awkward stares, forced to maintain politeness. The first days were tense. Karen tried to keep her interactions minimal. But soon, she was obliged to assist a gentleman in a wheelchair who reminded her faintly of George, kindly, frail, in need of a stable push. Helping him around triggered an internal conflict. She realized the vulnerability of seniors reliant on wheels. Perhaps a seed of remorse sprouted. If she had any empathy left, seeing these seniors daily might spark shame for having shoved George. No official redemption arc was forced upon her, but staff noted she softened slightly after a week, less curt with the residents. She spoke politely, even smiling once. The mandatory community service hours seemed to forcibly immerse her in the perspective of those she once disdained. Some staffers guessed she might emerge more humble. Others doubted it, but at least she was forced to confront her wrongdoing tangibly. Meanwhile, Birchwood Meadows took little notice of her penance. They were busy living more harmoniously, celebrating small joys. The crafters sometimes quipped that Karen's busy at her senior center internship, letting the matter rest. If she gleaned a lesson, so be it. If not, they'd remain vigilant. For now, the entire fiasco had ended in the best possible conclusion. The ramp remained free, new carts roamed free, and the entire neighborhood found itself knitted closer by a single violent act that was thoroughly repudiated. That summer, Birchwood Meadows felt livelier than ever. Neighborhood barbecues blossomed, the wheels of kindness carts frequently seen gliding around. The crafters set up crocheting corners in the clubhouse lawn, occasionally joined by George or Carl. Children soared on bicycles, unafraid of petty complaints. Ms. Daniels introduced a more lenient approach to bylaw enforcement, focusing on real issues rather than trivial aesthetic rules. The community felt less stifled, more human. George regained full confidence, using his cart daily. Sometimes he'd encounter a borrowed cart from the donation pool, both exchanging waves in friendly recognition. He still had mild flashbacks of Karen's shove, but the unwavering support overshadowed that memory. Martha, seeing how the neighbors cherished her father, let go of her initial fury. She recognized the community had given them justice and love. Karen completed her mandated community service, returning to her quiet house. Some neighbors glimpsed her clearing out minor possessions. No official forced sale sign yet. A friend of hers mentioned in passing that Karen was still deciding. Meanwhile, the censure remained in effect. She had zero involvement in HOA committees, nor was she welcome at official functions. She'd lost her platform. The moral scorn from the fiasco never abated. And so the daily routines continued, overshadowed no more by Karen's negativity. Freed from her controlling presence, the wheels and the ramp usage soared unabated. The entire fiasco had ironically ushered in a golden era of acceptance for mobility devices. The violence that once marred the sidewalks was replaced by a tapestry of kindly gestures, neighbors offering each other rides, crocheted seat cushions for new borrowers, or simply cheerful greetings from porch steps. Late in the summer, the crafters and the new wheelchair/mobility crowd decided to hold a small festival to celebrate unity, the mobility and craft harvest. They set up stands by the clubhouse, featuring crocheted items for sale, potluck dishes, and a row of wheels of kindness carts for test rides. Ms. Daniels recognized it as a perfect reflection of the new spirit. Crafters, wheelchair users, and supportive neighbors, all celebrating the synergy that overcame Karen's hateful act. During the festival, George took the stage momentarily, assisted by a microphone. He thanked everyone for rallying after his assault. In the darkest moment, I saw how kindness can rally a community, he said softly, voice trembling with gratitude. The applause was thunderous. Then he introduced the Wheels of Kindness volunteers, praising Sam, the local caretaker of the carts, and Linda, the crocheter who donated seat covers, for sustaining the program. People admired how a single negative act birthed so much positivity. Karen, overshadowed, did not attend. A few attendees cast glances around, half expecting her to appear. She did not. The day ended with a feeling that the neighborhood's moral identity had been reaffirmed. An attack on an elderly man had galvanized them to champion accessibility. The festival ended at sunset, tiki torches lighting the walkway, the carts parked in neat rows, each with a crocheted name tag. In that moment, Ms. Daniels quietly told a friend she'd never been prouder of Birchwood Meadows. The fiasco had tested them, and they'd responded with unwavering empathy. They overcame pettiness, forging a deeper communal bond. The orchard of goodwill overshadowed any single weed of cruelty. In early autumn, rumors flared again. A realtor's car was parked outside Karen's house for an afternoon. 2 days later, a for sale sign appeared on her front lawn, confirming her departure. Some neighbors felt relief, others a twinge of pity. Yet most recognized that she'd become an outcast after physically harming George. The censure, the lawsuit, and her public disgrace overshadowed any future she might have in Birchwood Meadows. Karen never held a formal goodbye. She posted no final rant on the forum. Some guessed she might be resigned to her fate, leaving quietly to start anew where her reputation was unknown. A few neighbors said they spied moving trucks at dawn. By the end of the week, the sign read under contract. Karen was gone. At the next HOA meeting, Ms. Daniels announced that Ms. Arnett had relinquished any further claims or positions. The board accepted it with minimal fanfare. Freed from her constant meddling, the HOA returned to a gentler style of governance. Instead of punishing minor infractions, they concentrated on genuine community improvements, like ramp expansions, accessible benches near scenic spots, and relaxed guidelines for yard expressions. For George, hearing Karen was leaving brought mixed relief. He didn't wish her harm, but after the violent act, coexisting peacefully felt impossible. Patty, Carl, and the entire wheelchair group let out a collective sigh. The shadow that once policed sidewalks had faded. Freed from the fear of further aggression, they embraced the bright sidewalks wholeheartedly, rolling around without second thought. With Karen's house sold, her presence in Birchwood Meadows ended. The new owners, a young couple with an infant, found the community welcoming. They too admired the Wheels of Kindness program, occasionally borrowing a cart if grandparents visited. The once scarred neighborhood now felt fully healed, blossoming into a haven of acceptance. The final resolution arrived when Ms. Daniels, at a board meeting, read a short statement acknowledging the painful fiasco. We regret that a violent act against one of our seniors occurred. It does not define our values. In the aftermath, we recognize the depth of empathy we share, culminating in initiatives that ensure mobility for all. The applause was heartfelt. Ms. Daniels concluded by highlighting the newly lowered dues and expanding accessibility measures, two direct results of the fiasco. George continued to recover fully, his bruises long healed. The emotional scar lingered, but overshadowed by gratitude. He resumed daily rides, greeting friends old and new. Martha occasionally teased him, "Your celebrity status remains. Everyone knows Grandpa George." He'd chuckle, content that from tragedy, a testament to communal compassion arose. Meanwhile, the crafters crocheted celebratory mobility ribbons, a small token for each of the donated carts. The entire fiasco had taught them how quickly neighbors could unify to protect the vulnerable. In a quiet reflection, Ms. Daniels told George, "Sometimes adversity shows us who we really are. Karen tried to tear us down, but we're stronger because of her attempt." News of Birchwood Meadows' Wheels of Kindness success trickled into nearby HOAs. A small local media outlet did a short piece on how the neighborhood overcame an assault on a senior by providing multiple mobility carts. They interviewed Ms. Daniels and Linda from the Crafters Group, who humbly recounted the story. They didn't dwell on Karen's identity or motives, focusing on the heroic communal response. In the piece, George gave a brief statement. "I never asked for conflict, but thanks to my neighbors, I walk, well, roll without fear. If we can encourage other places to do likewise, I'm grateful." The segment ended with a shot of multiple seniors riding around the block, beaming. The next day, Ms. Daniels fielded calls from other HOAs curious about replicating the car donation program. She happily shared details, hoping to spread the spirit of inclusivity. Karen, presumably in her new location, might have glimpsed the coverage, recognizing how thoroughly her plan had backfired. She had inflicted pain and moral outrage, only for the community to respond with unprecedented generosity. If she harbored any regrets, it remained private. Meanwhile, Birchwood Meadows soared in local standing, a shining example that an assault on the vulnerable could unite neighbors in a tidal wave of empathy. Carl also found a piece of that empathy. Freed from Karen's overshadowing hostility, he joined an activist group working to ensure suburbs design accessible sidewalks from start. Ms. Daniels encouraged him, seeing him as the perfect champion for a more inclusive future. The transformation from a place overshadowed by petty tyranny into a beacon of accessibility felt nearly complete. A year after Karen shoved George off his cart, Birchwood Meadows had found a new equilibrium. The Wheels of Kindness program thrived, with a rotating pool of mobility carts for short-term loan. Ms. Daniels, re-elected HOA president, maintained the lower dues, praising the robust finances. The board's approach to bylaw enforcement softened, focusing on genuine improvements over trivial fines. The entire community gleaned a more relaxed, compassionate tone. George, his cart once targeted, now found himself in a safer environment than ever. He sometimes led small cart tours around the scenic perimeter, inviting other seniors or visitors to join. The group might park near the pond for a chat, unhurried, unharassed. The memory of Karen's push remained a cautionary tale, but the fear had vanished, replaced by acceptance. People still used the grandpa moniker lovingly, seeing him as a gentle figure whose adversity had spurred deeper unity. Karen's old home was inhabited by a friendly young family. The father approached George once, saying, "We heard about what happened. We're so sorry. We want you to know we'd never condone that." George assured them it was in the past. A cycle of negativity had broken, replaced by a legacy of positivity. The father sometimes used a borrowed cart to give rides to his toddler around the block, continuing the communal tradition. In the hush of a typical Birchwood evening, crafters crocheted in pavilions, kids played on sidewalks, seniors rolled about freely, never again hampered by fear of sabotage or assault. They had proven that cruelty could spark an unstoppable wave of solidarity. Karen's attempt to exclude the slow-moving cart ironically unleashed more mobility devices, more acceptance, and greater harmony than ever before. And so the story concluded, a single violent act overshadowed by a lasting communal triumph. George, the teen Trevor, Carl, Ms. Daniels, and the rest of Birchwood Meadows carried on, forging a neighborhood knit together by unwavering empathy, forever rejecting any voice that demanded the vulnerable be cast aside.